Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Tracy Abel, Chief Operating Officer here at American College of Healthcare Sciences, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Beyond the Cap Conversations in Complementary Alternative Medicine Conference. Before we get started with our next session, just a little housekeeping. First, joining us behind the scenes today is our technical guru, Andy Pearson. He is online with the GoToMeeting and ready to answer any questions our online attendees have. For those of you joining us online, you'll notice that your line has been muted. We are recording today's session and we'll be sharing the recording with all of you after the event. You'll also notice that you have a control panel at the right-hand side of your screen. If you have a question for the presenter during the webinar, please feel free to type your question in the questions box, and we will have time at the end to address those questions. If you have a more detailed question, you're also welcome to email us at info@achs.edu, and we'll facilitate you getting in touch with the presenter. If you're joining us here in the classroom in Portland, you're welcome to raise your hand at any time and ask a question, and our presenter will repeat the question for the benefit of our online audience. Now I'm very excited to introduce you to our ACHS Herbal Medicine Program Chair and Professor, Scott Stuart. Scott has been an integral member of our faculty team for over 10 years and leads our herbal medicine department. Today, Scott will be talking about safety and dosage guidelines in herbal medicine. This lecture is a comprehensive overview of herbal safety and covers the importance of things like using Latin names, distinguishing between look-alike and sound-alike herbs, herb-drug interactions, and more. So now, welcome, Scott Stuart.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good to see your happy faces here today. Thanks for being here with me, whether you're in the room or online. My background is as a licensed acupuncturist in traditional Chinese medicine. So the concepts in Chinese medicine have always informed and influenced me, but I have some background in traditional American or North American medicine and European herbal medicine as well. So that's where I come from whenever I'm talking about or working with herbal medicine. Now I'm talking about safety and dosage guidelines in herbal medicine. The basics of safety, if you're making herbal medicine, is to keep things clean in the kitchen, pay attention to what you're doing, and be organized. But that's not enough. There's a lot more about safety. That's just if you're making medicine. For me, part of safety is putting the cat outside, because if I'm in the kitchen, he thinks he's going to get fed, so he's underfoot all the time. And if I'm working and concentrating on what I'm doing in the kitchen, I'm going to step on him. And he's going to scream, and I'm going to drop everything. So I'm going to start with a joke. How many herbalists does it take to change a light bulb? Anybody? It only takes one, but the light bulb has to want to change. Okay. So let's go here. Number one rule, other than being organized, being clean, and putting the cat out, is to know your source. Now your source, the best source really, is for you to be your own source. Grow your own, or go out and learn the wild weeds around you and wildcraft them. But you can't wildcraft every herb you want, and you may not be able to grow every herb you want. So eventually you're going to have to buy some herbs. You're going to buy the fresh herbs, you're going to buy a preparation. So know your source. One reason that is so important is that a hot topic right now in the herbal world is the issue of economically motivated adulteration. Now, herbs are very complex. There's issues of quality control. Sometimes there's contamination by accident. It's not intentional, but it does happen. But when you have such a high interest in herbs now, and there are, herbs get trendy and the supply may not be enough to fulfill the demand, and they're particularly with expensive herbs, producers may adulterate the herbs with something that is lower quality or lower cost ingredients. And the American Botanical Council has been tracking this, and they're publishing on their website. So far, they've published 16 bulletins on the adulteration of usually it's supplements, but that's And they include products like arnica, bilberry extracts, black cohosh, grapefruit extract. Grapefruit extract has sometimes it's actually industrial disinfectants that are sold as grapefruit extract, and those can be toxic. So people have been caught doing this. Doesn't mean every grapefruit extract is, something from industrial thing, but it can be. Black cohosh, the Chinese use, I think, 4 different plants as black cohosh. Sometimes an inferior quality black cohosh is used, or the normal black cohosh is mixed with an inferior species. So that's another area. Maca has been adulterated with dried potato. So there's issues. So knowing your source is essential. Now, I also encourage you to go to the American Botanical Council's website and become a member, and go to the pages where you can read the bulletins, because they are not a regulatory body. They can't fine anybody, but they can educate us, and the information is readily available. So solutions to knowing your source: buy local. Get to know the folks at your local herb shops and farmers markets. I love my farmers markets because I've been going to the same farmers markets for years, and I know people really well. I can stand there and talk to them. I can ask them how they grow things. I can get an idea of their attitudes and their values. Same thing with local herb shops. Walk in, make sure that people know what they're doing. I've been to one herb shop here in town. Great selection, great products, but the person who was actually running the place didn't seem to really know a lot. So I go there for the products, but I'm not going to learn anything from talking to anybody there. Other places where I've gone, people are very knowledgeable and skilled and ready to talk and very friendly. Again, I said grow your own. It's important to learn Latin binomials, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Wildcrafting is a great way, as we heard previous speaker talking about wildcrafting plants. Get to know the plants in your area. A friend of mine and I sat down, this was several years ago. We wildcraft together, and then we sit down and have a beer when we're done and we talk. So one time we decided, well, how many plants and mushrooms do we know that are edible and medicinal within, an hour's drive? And we started writing down on a napkin. We came up with over 100 plants and mushrooms that we know. We hadn't necessarily identified them all or wildcrafted them all, but we know they grow here. So we have 100 plants at least in this area that you can walk out into the woods, and there they are. Now, you need to study plant identification, because that's a very important thing. So you go on an herb walk with somebody who's experienced, and once you've seen the plants in the area and you've gone out there maybe seasonally to look at the stages of their lives, you're always going to be able to identify them. Once you've seen them in the wild and you've gotten to know them, some plants are super easy to identify. Stinging nettles, you don't even have to see. You can find them in the dark because you reach out and look at stung. It's a good idea to attend conferences where you can meet and talk with representatives of herb companies. There's a lot of little small, like kitchen home businesses, but it's important to get to know people. And even online, you can make a phone call, you can send emails, and you ask your questions. You'll get a sense of what a good source is. But get to know your source, and get to be friends. Once you find somebody who you know and trust, then spend your dollars there. Support them. Now, if you're making home medicine, make a label. This is really important. I've done things where I'll make the label later. So I put it up on the shelf because I want to cook dinner or something. A couple months go by and there's a jar up there. What the heck is that? So I'm see if I can identify by smell, or maybe do I want to taste this or not? So there's a lot of information that can go on a label, like the common name, the Latin binomial. For me, I would, if it's a Chinese herb as well, I might put the Chinese name. Pugon Ying is Mandarin for dandelion. The date where I bottled it, if I used a ratio of 1 milliliter of alcohol to 5 grams of plant matter, then I'll write that on there. I don't usually write the information about its actions, like dandelion clears heat, relieves toxicity, it's bitter, sweet, cold, has affinities for the liver and stomach. I have to have a really big label for all this. But you could put some of this information on there. If you're an herbalist, hopefully you know the herbal actions and its affinities already. But if you make something for external use, like I've made a tincture of rosemary, but I used rubbing alcohol. This was for external use for easing muscle. Big red letters for external use only, and you put it up somewhere where the kids can't get it. Okay, that's safe right there. So, Latin names. Which lavender? There's 39 species of lavender. There's the one that we most want as herbalists is L. angustifolia. But there's 38 other kinds, and some of them are relaxing, and some of them are stimulating, and some of them are sweet, and some of them are not so sweet. These Latin names also, it's not just something to memorize. Latin names tell you something about the plant. Angustifolia means narrow leaf. So you know this is the narrow leaf species of all these lavenders. You'll notice that there are other herbs that are called angustifolia, such as Echinacea angustifolia. That's the narrow leaf, excuse me, that's the narrow leaf version of Echinacea. Now, I've seen common names for lavender, angustifolia, as English lavender, French lavender, but when I go to buy seeds or buy starts, I look for the Latin name. Now, lavender, Lavandula stoicus, is called Spanish lavender. Its constituent profile is a little different. You may find it stimulating. It's a very lovely ornamental. Stoicus is actually not Latin, it's Greek, and it means in rows. That doesn't tell me a lot about the plant, because if anything's being grown, it's usually being grown in rows. But that's not all Latin names are actually Latin names, but a lot of them are actually Greek names, because back when they were started, the botanists started naming everything, they were usually trained classically in Latin and Greek, as well as whatever their native language was. At this point, I'd like to recommend this book. I bought this at the apothecary shop. It's on the shelf right over there. And this has over 3,000 plant names explained. You get how to pronounce them. You get to learn what those words actually mean. So I'm going to pass this around so everybody can look at it. It's a lovely, lovely volume. And I just bought it because it's really pretty. But it turned out to be one of my favorite books. So there's Lavandin, which is sometimes mistaken for lavender. It's a hybrid. Lavandula crossed with intermedia. Intermedia means intermediate in shape or color or a form. Grosso doesn't mean it's disgusting. It just means grosso means big, really big. So this is one that's the plant itself is a very long, larger version of lavender. It looks a lot like the angustifolia. It's high in camphor, and it is grown a lot for essential oils, but it's not the one that most people want to use. But you might want to use it. If you want to use it, you have the Latin name, so you can get exactly what you want. It's less expensive than the angustifolia. It's used in a lot of commercial products, and it might be good for insect repellent or for colds because of its camphor content. Now, Echinacea species, here's an interesting historical thing. Echinacea was a Native American herb that the Eclectics brought into the forefront in American herbal medicine because there weren't antibiotics. And I don't want to go into the huge long story of how the Eclectics came to know this plant, but they couldn't necessarily distinguish the species themselves. And there was an error made. There was a German pharmaceutical company that contacted the Eclectics. I think it was the Lloyd brothers, who had a business, herbal medicine business in Chicago, I believe. So the Lloyd brothers mistakenly sent Echinacea purpurea, or purple Echinacea, rather than angustifolia, which is what the Germans wanted. So the Germans got the roots, and they did a lot of research and experimentation, and purpurea became the main species in Europe because of this error. Now, a lot of herbalists will argue which is the superior form. Unfortunately, the angustifolia version doesn't take to domestication. It's really difficult to grow. Someone's going to figure it out, so we'll have that. But as it had such a high demand because it was thought of as a superior form, that it's now highly endangered, and it's been endangered for a long time. So this is a case historically of a mistake that was made because of plant identification, and it's kind of changed the history of the use of echinacea. And the original product made by the German company is still available in Europe. Now, big philosophical thought number one: herbal medicine is not a substitute for a smart diet, regular exercise, quality sleep, managing stress, and a balance of work and play. The best use of herbs is to incorporate them as part of your balanced life to enhance radiant health. Echinacea, for example, I think is not only the most used herb, it is the most misused herb. Far too many people use it to ward off illness while burning the candle at both ends, and this is not the way to use herbal medicine. If you're using herbal medicine this way, in the long run, it's a recipe for disaster. You can only support yourself with herbal medicine while you're making bad choices for so long, and then you're going to crash. So there's an old quote: first the word, then the herb, then the knife. That's the hierarchy. First you learn how to live a good life. Now, there's always an issue with lookalikes. You got yarrow and wild carrot look a lot alike if you aren't skilled with them. I grew up with wild carrot, and I used to pick it from my mom, because in the fall it was everywhere. We knew it as Queen Anne's lace. Now, if you mistake one for the other, it's not a big deal because you're not going to poison yourself. They're both medicinal. But if you mistake one for the other and use it as herbal medicine, it's not going to do what you want it to do because they have different herbal actions. Yarrow is vascular tonic, it's diaphoretic, it's antiseptic, it's good for wounds. It helps balance a woman's moon cycles, and it's an aromatic digestive bitter, while wild carrot is a diuretic, reduces liver congestion. It's also helpful with adjusting a woman's moon cycle. So if you were looking for a menagogue herb, either one of these would have been okay. However, moving on here, sound-alikes. Tansy is herbal medicine. It's a medium strength herb. A lot of herbalists won't use it because of potential toxicity. Tansy ragwort, on the other hand, is toxic to wildlife, and contamination with other plants with tansy ragwort is potentially toxic to human beings. Now, I took these pictures about a mile from where I live. The tansy ragwort is all over the place. You're looking at the only little bunch of tansy vulgare that I've ever found. And I went back year after year after taking this picture, and it was only there for a very short time. So it's important. I urge people to find a place and go back every couple of weeks and just hike around and look at plants, because that was there only for maybe a week or two, and then it was gone and never came back. So the difference between the two, the vulgare is tansy. It's a medium strength remedy with some chronic toxic accumulation from the thujone or thujone. It's used for amenorrhea, colitis, colds, fevers, indigestion, loss of appetite. It was originally brought here and naturalized because it was used for puddings and omelets, which is crazy to me. It's like, I'm trying to imagine a pudding made from this plant. How would they do that? Somewhere there's a recipe, right? I wouldn't want to put it in an omelet. Tansy ragwort is toxic, highly toxic. And it's possible threat to humans through contamination of the food chain, which I mentioned. Okay, Angelica. This is another look-alike. There's Angelica archangelica, which is a tonic. It's spicy, aromatic, stimulates the digestion. It's a very useful herb, and it looks an awful lot like poison hemlock and water hemlock, which are the two most toxic plants in North America. I find it really disturbing that in the same place where I took the pictures of the tansy, there's an awful lot of poison hemlock there. This is in a public park. And the hemlocks look an awful lot like Angelica, particularly because of the inflorescence that they have. It's that sort of that umbel the shape that the two plants have. They're not exactly alike, but an awful lot of people who are not skilled will harvest hemlock and use it as angelica, and they're going to get really sick or they're just going to die. Yes?
Stupid question. What is an umbel? I've read it, but I didn't understand what it was.
Umbel is a description of the shape of like an umbrella. The shape of the blossom.
Okay.
And if you want to sound like you're a botanist, you call it an inflorescence. So the poison hemlock grows all over the place. Now, the thing with lookalikes, there's usually 2 or 3 distinct features that helps you identify the hemlock. And one of the things about hemlock is it's a hollow stem, and it has purple splotches on the stem, whereas angelica does not. And when you start going out into the wild and looking at plants, you need to understand the difference. The same thing is true with mushrooms. There's some really delicious mushrooms that look exactly like deadly poisonous mushrooms, but the deadly poisonous mushrooms has 2 or 3 features that are only distinct to that particular mushroom. So you need to learn those things if you're going to go out and start in areas where there's plants that look alike and one's deadly and one's not. And you know, if you don't know what you're doing, you may only get one chance to make a proper identification. I can't emphasize that enough. Another important thing, I think this is really important, not necessarily for safety, but for picking the right herb. When we start out learning about herbs, we think headache, oh, feverfew, right? Well, yes, feverfew is good for headaches if you have a feverfew headache. Feverfew releases constraint, and it is cooling in nature. So if you have a hot headache, then feverfew is great. But if you have a cold headache, for example, then ginger, which is stimulating and warming, releases constraint. So a lot of people find that their migraines, for example, respond to ginger and not feverfew. That's a difference in the nature of the plant itself. So it's important to know everything you can about the herb when you're selecting it. You want to know its nature, its flavor, its organ affinities, and its medical indications. It's not enough to just think this herb for this condition. Now, plant parts, sometimes it's important to know the plant parts. Kava kava, for example, the roots are traditionally used, but other plant parts are toxic to the liver. And this is another place where in the past there has either been contamination or the source material was adulterated, and there's cases of liver toxicity, people needing liver getting really sick or needing a liver replacement or something, either out of greed or ignorance or not understanding traditional use. Nettles, now you can use nettle root, you can use nettle leaves, you can use nettle seeds, but each plant part contains all of the effects of the plant, but each part emphasizes. So roots are more astringent and decongestant. It's often used in more diuretic and has an immune stimulating action. Seeds are traditionally used as a thyroid stimulant in cases of subclinical hypothyroid. Now, I've harvested nettle seeds, and when I was out, I thought, okay, I've read that it's stimulating. So I took about 9 seeds and I ate them. Just 9 seeds, and the seeds are really super tiny. And I felt really good. And I felt really good it was a beautiful sunny day. It was warm out, and I was out in nature. So that was probably part of it. But the seeds are really stimulating. And for people who have a hypothyroid condition, a tincture can be quite helpful. Plant parts, sometimes the plant part doesn't matter. Echinacea, you can use the roots, seeds, and the aerial parts. They all have the same action. In fact, if you're growing echinacea, why not use the whole plant and tincture that? Hawthorn berries, blossoms, and the tender spring leaves all have the same actions. I think there's been, from what I've been studying, there's been more research done on the blossoms and the tender spring leaves as herbal medicine and what the constituents are than there are in the berries. Now, the berries have been traditionally used in China as a digestive aid because it helps digest proteins and carbohydrates together. The Chinese never picked up on the cardiovascular tonic aspect until they had much more contact with the Western traditions. So now in older books, when you read about hawthorn, there won't be anything about the Western use. More modern books, of course, have included that. So there's been some cross education there. Dandelions, the leaves, roots are quite similar. The leaves are more diuretic, but when I go out and harvest dandelions, I tincture the blossoms, I tincture the roots, I tincture the leaves, and that makes a wonderful tincture. So if you're dealing with a client, a very important aspect of safety is one of the first things you want to ask, do you have any allergies? Now, the Asteraceae herbs, yarrow, dandelion, chamomile, boneset, calendula, feverfew, and echinacea. There are a lot of really useful herbs in this botanical family, but if someone's allergic to one of them, they're probably going to be allergic to all of them. So what are your allergies? If you have an intake form, that's going to be on the front, the first page after you get their name, address, and telephone number and why they're here. So allergies. Next question, what medications and supplements are you taking? Herb-drug interactions is it's a very young science. If you read a lot about herb-drug interactions, they'll be qualifying. It may, it could, it might, potentially. I mean, there are certain herb-drug interactions that we know of, such as interaction with blood thinners. I mean, I've known people who were on blood thinners, they had to watch carefully what they ate, and certain vegetables will affect the blood thinners by interacting with the cytochrome P450 system, and it can upregulate or downregulate the medication because of the way that the liver is clearing, breaking down the medication. So I don't, if someone is on blood thinners, I won't do herbs. I know herbalists who will, but they recommend that their client get blood work frequently. But I'm not going to recommend that because that's an added expense to the person and it's an added time commitment. So I just don't do it. I will not recommend any herbs for somebody on blood thinners. Yes?
And does that include aspirin?
I don't like recommending aspirin. Yeah, I know a lot of people who they take it as a blood thinner, right?
Well, my husband, he had a stroke 3 years ago, and so they put him on a 325 milligram aspirin daily. They tried the baby aspirin, he was still too clotty, so then they put him up to a 325 of aspirin every day.
There's qualified. He's using an aspirin as a blood thinner. This is not coumarin or warfarin. Those are very tricky to dose, just as a medication.
Okay.
If he's on using the aspirin, I might be a little reluctant. I'd have to look at any herb that contains a substance similar to aspirin.
Okay.
Because aspirin, it comes from meadowsweet and there's other plants that have that. So I would say if the person's taking aspirin, I wouldn't add anything that had the similar constituent to what aspirin is.
So no white willow for sure.
Yes, exactly. I was trying to think white willow. General, yes.
The other thing that you might want to consider is like ginkgo,
yes,
ginger, bilberry, even turmeric. All have sort of similar anti-platelet. So you want to avoid any herb that has an anti-platelet activity. So, and you could look that up.
I remember reading some of that in class.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, general heart medications, the potential to interact with hawthorn and dongui or Angelica sinensis, because they have similar actions as some of the heart medications. That's something to look at. Another action that I think is important, I mean, there's a lot of other potential herb-drug interactions, but these are ones that are important and stand out to me. With the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor medications that a lot of people are on, St. John's wort has an effect upon the liver and the CYP450 system. It interacts with that. So St. John's wort can upregulate or downregulate the clearing of those medications. And if someone's on one of these medications and suddenly the medication isn't working as well because St. John's wort is having the liver clear the medication more quickly. So there's a potential for it affecting the clearing of the medication that the liver does. There's herb interactions to take into consideration, and two important categories are cathartic and diuretic herbs. They're both draining, so they're draining fluids from the body. So if you combine them, you're going to overdrain, and that can result in dehydration and loss of electrolytes. Don't use them together. My tradition in Chinese medicine traditional Chinese medicine is a vitalistic or energetic tradition. So they're always looking at the herbal energetics. Some herbs are warming and some herbs are cooling. For example, diaphoretics and expectorants can be either warming and stimulating or relaxing and cooling. So you need to choose the herb with the nature to match the condition. Now, I have seen or heard of a case when I was a student where the student intern in the student clinic gave cold herbs or herbs that reduce fever to somebody who had a cold condition, the chills. This was a case of flu. The flu did not get better, it got worse, and it took the person a lot longer to recover once the mistake was made. And once they figured out, why aren't you getting better? Oh, we're cooling off a cold condition. So you want to use the proper herb for the condition. So let's talk a little bit, or a lot, about the art of herbal dosage. Now, if you're a student, one of the first things you use, a tincture is 20 to 40 drops 3 times a day. Tea is 1 teaspoon of herb in a cup of water. Infusions and decoctions are 1 ounce of herb in 1 pint of water, and that's a pretty good way to follow. But that's not always the case. I'm going to have a quote here from the eclectic herbalist John M. Scudder. Scudder was probably the best and most famous of the eclectics, and I think studying the eclectics is really an important thing. You can go online and you can find some of the materia medica in PDF form, and looking at how these people, they were medical doctors, physicians, and they were eclectic. In other words, they would use whatever method they thought was best, including herbs. So he said, and he's debunking everything that I'm about to say, but as a rule, the dose of medicine should be the smallest quantity that will produce the desired result. The proper dose, or that which gives the best result, is very much smaller than one who has been used to the large doses of indirect medicine would suppose possible. The dose will vary in different cases and with different practitioners. I am satisfied that the size of the dose does not make much difference, as has been thought, and that the essential element of success is to get the right remedy. So there's 2 things in there that I do agree with. The smallest quantity that gives you the results is the best dose. And choosing the right remedy is probably the most important thing. And I'm going to refer back to what I was saying about knowing everything about what an herb does is what helps you choose the right remedy. Now, this is another consideration for dose: is the condition an acute condition or a chronic condition? Acute conditions is something maybe it just happens. It happened 2 days ago, and colds, sprains and strains, urinary tract infections, for example, they have a sudden onset. Boom, one day you're fine, the next day you're not. And generally with treatment, these are going to have a short duration. Those can be increased or given more frequently for several days. When I have a cold or somebody comes to me about a cold, I will use for myself, at least for the first day or so, a pretty high dose of the herbs, because if I'm taking them in a high dose, I'm only going to be taking them for about 3 days, so there's really little danger of mild herbs that we use for colds of having any toxic accumulation. Or I'll take the standard dose, but I'll take it not 3 times a day, but I'll take it 5 times a day. I'm drinking a lot of tea. If the condition, the acute condition, doesn't improve in 2 or 3 days or returns after the course of herbs is completed, then you need to refer them to a primary care provider. On the other hand, chronic issues such as chronic pain, digestive complaints, insomnia, menstrual issues, constitutional imbalances in the terrain, long-term use of herbs, I reduce the amount and maybe only have the person take it twice a day. I do that a lot with Chinese herbs, just with these chronic conditions twice a day. I've had people take herbal formulas for 8, 9, 10 months, and they walk through the door and we're dealing with a metabolic kind of thing like hypothyroid or something. I tell them, okay, but I'm happy to work with you, but don't even decide if this is working for 3 months. Just have faith and take the herbs. So, When people are committed, they will get better, right? But sometimes, if somebody has rheumatoid arthritis, it's like, don't make up your mind for a year. It took you 50 years to get to this point. It's not going to fix itself in a couple of weeks. So you need to discern whether it's an acute condition or a chronic condition. If you're using medium strength herbs, and I'll get to that in maybe the next slide here, you need to take breaks of 3 or 4 days, because medium strength herbs are herbs that have the potential for toxic accumulation. So you need to give the body a chance to clear the toxic constituents. I get asked about doses for children, and I like Clark's rule. There's a lot of rules out there, but Clark's rules goes by the weight of the child. My son was 14, he weighed about 125 pounds. He was a skinny little kid. He had a classmate who was 14 years old, same age. Kid was 6 feet tall and probably weighed 180 pounds. So going just by age for a child may not be the best way. So Clark's rule, you put the child's weight over 150 and you reduce the fraction. So if the child is 50 pounds, you put that over 150, you get 1/3. That is the dose for the child who weighs 50 pounds. 1/3 of the adult dose. So if the adult dose is 30 drops 3 times a day, the child's dose is 10 drops 3 times a day. It's not 30 drops once. You have to go with the course of treatment as well. With kids, you're going to usually use herbs for just a short period of time anyway. So you can extrapolate the weight of the child into the weight of an adult. You consider the adult dose as somebody who weighs around 150 pounds. But as the weight of the adult increases by 50 pounds, you increase the dose by an additional third. So between 150 pounds to 200 pounds, you can increase the dose up to 133% and so on. And this is a great way for somebody who's typically normally fairly healthy. Now, herbal categories and therapeutic margins. Mild herbs have a wide therapeutic margin. They work really well at the standard dose. Mild herbs, I love the mild herbs. I think they work deeply. They might work more slowly, but thyme, hyssop, basil, or as my Canadian friend says, basil, horehound, hawthorn, rose. We know these herbs. Chamomile, St. John's wort, motherwort, echinacea, Oregon grape. Medium strength herbs are herbs with potential for toxic accumulation. Don't be afraid to use them, but don't use them as a first resort. Use them when mild herbs fail to produce the desired effects in a reasonable amount of time. They need to be used with guidelines for a short course or as a small part of a larger formula. You might be surprised to see peppermint on here, the essential oil and tincture, but too much peppermint over too long of a time, one thing that can do is cause heart palpitations, and that's unpleasant. So, and that's not something that comes up a lot. Bone set, blue cohosh, pennyroyal, these are, have quite a potential for toxic accumulation. But as you gain experience as an herbalist, don't be afraid to use these herbs when it is appropriate. Mugwort, juniper berry, angelica root, wormwood, lobelia, valerian. Some people are surprised to see valerian on the list, but valerian taken for too long and too high of a dose will actually replicate the symptoms that people take valerian to eliminate. And I've known of a couple of my students over the time shared that in the class, where they got jittery and they had delusions and insomnia, but because, valerian, it helps me sleep, I'll just take it forever. No, that's not a good idea. You need to take breaks on that. Now, toxic herbs, don't use them or only with special training and experience. Now, I know that there are herbalists here in the area who go out, you can't buy you shouldn't be able to buy a tincture of a toxic plant. So they have to go out and they have to wildcraft them very carefully. They have to be processed very carefully, and they are used in what's called drop dose. 1 to 3 drops only. 3 drops of these tinctures are the maximum dose. Now, some herbalists like to use them. Personally, I think they're showing off. But they like to use them because toxic herbs will get quick symptomatic relief. And somebody hasn't really used herbs or is a little sketchy, like I don't know about this, but when they see how they get very quick results of the symptomatic relief, then they're like, okay, I'm all about herbs now. I've heard that, I haven't experienced this, but I've heard more than one story where somebody was out, they were going to make their drop dose tincture, and they were driving home with a bag of aconite in the car, and they had the windows rolled down or windows rolled up. There was no air circulating from outside, and they would start getting a little woozy. I've even heard of hikers sitting down on a log next to monk's hood, aconite, and getting some just from the fumes of the plant and getting. So these are very strong. These are very potent. So don't use them until and unless you have been well trained on how to harvest them and how to process them. Some herbs act differently, whether they're warm or cold. Sage, for instance, is a good example. Sage, when used hot in an infusion, it's a diaphoretic when the skin has stopped breathing. So they're not perspiring, right? So you can induce perspiration with a really warm infusion of sage. But if you use it cold, it does the exact opposite thing, which is fascinating to me. It will reduce excess sweating, and when it's taken cold, and it has an astringent action that some mothers will use to stop the flow of milk when they want to wean their child. Fresh or dried is another consideration for the safe and proper use. There's certain plants that I think are best fresh. Cleavers, St. John's wort, borage, chickweed, they're more effective fresh, I think. Other plants have to be dried. Boneset, for example, the fresh plant is toxic. It has a constituent called tremetrol, which is greatly reduced by drying it. Never make a tincture from fresh boneset. Another herb that's toxic is poke root. Poke root is really toxic when it's fresh, but it has to be dried for a long time, and that reduces its toxicity. It's still an herb that you want to use only in small doses. I know some naturopathic doctors locally who use boneset tincture as a decongestant for the lymphatic system, but no more than 9 drops. So this is one where it doesn't fall into the 30 to 40 drops category. This is like 9 drops is the max. Ginger acts differently whether it's fresh or dried. This is the traditional Chinese medicine. In traditional Chinese medicine, fresh ginger and dried ginger are thought of as 2 different herbs. Fresh ginger is a warming diaphoretic, and it acts on the surface of the body and as an expectorant. Dried, it warms the interior. It gets into the internal organs. It's not a surface plant. It's used for a cold in the digestive tract or in the lungs. So I tend to use them interchangeably. I prefer fresh ginger, but if I've got dried ginger, I'll use that. I've even heard people going over to the sushi place and getting the pickled ginger. Small doses of herbs behave differently than large doses. Small doses act more energetically. They stimulate innate physiological and neurological and hormonal responses and affect the subtle energy patterns of psyche, of mind and spirit. I've talked to a lot of herbalists about this, and they all agree. Very commonly, a lot of herbalists will use hawthorn tincture for a broken heart. You think of hawthorn as being tonic to the physical heart, which it definitely is. But with heartbreak, the heart's been symbolically broken, and I've recommended hawthorn for a broken heart for 9 drops, smaller doses. Some people will get a little magical about it, and they'll say, take one of the thorns and put it in the tincture, because if you think about hawthorn the way it is, you have these beautiful blossoms and you have these thorns. So someone has to get back to blooming, right? They've got the protection of the thorns so that they can continue to come back to themselves and become a blossom again, right? in England, they would use hawthorn as a hedgerow. You can get your hand in there very carefully and gently to get to the berries, but those thorns are protected. Other thorny plants, such as the rose, I think of as the same way. Hawthorn is in the rose family. Larger doses have an effect on the gross body, not being disgusting, but the physical body. So that's something to think about, how to use these things for psyche or soma. Now, this isn't necessarily about herbal safety, but this is about a holistic approach. A quote from Chi Po, a Chinese physician who said this sometime around 2500 before the Christian era: to take medicine only when you're sick is like digging a well when you are thirsty. Is it already not too late? So I talked about using herbs not as a way of supporting your improper lifestyle. This is how I use herbs for myself. I mean, I use them, of course, if I have a condition I want to address with herbs. But when I'm fine, I follow the elements, the 5 elements of the 5 phases cycle. Summer is the fire element, and heart is the fire element organ. So in summertime, you can nourish and tonify the heart. And I talked about hawthorn. This is what comes to my mind. I will use hawthorn, or maybe a tincture of herbs that affect the spirit of the heart and the heart itself. Hawthorn's a slow-acting herb. It usually takes a couple months to really do its job. From fire element in the summer, we slide into fall, the element of metal. And that's the internal organs of that season are the lungs, which are associated with the immune system. The lungs are the internal organ that has the most contact with the external part, right? So we breathe in, we breathe out. And so I like astragalus as an immune system boosting herb. I don't think of echinacea as necessarily a tonic herb generally used for immunity. It acts really well in the presence of infection and to modulate and balance and strengthen immunity. But I like astragalus just as a tonic in the fall. You can also use reishi, or a combination of astragalus and reishi, or a formula that has astragalus or reishi as a chief herb. Yes? Oh, is a question? So from there, fall, we go into winter, and that's water around here. We all know that there's a lot of water falling out of the sky. That's the organs associated with the winter or the water element are the kidneys, which makes sense, and the adrenals, because the adrenal glands sit right on top of the kidneys, and in Chinese medicine is considered part of the kidneys. In fact, the kidneys are actually the entire endocrine system as well. I personally use ashwagandha. There are other herbs that are kind of as an adrenal tonic and as an adaptogen. That's me personally. These are just examples. If you have a favorite herb that you like to use, then by all means, connect it with the season and with the internal organ here in this cycle that you want to work on. And if you do this year by year, I think might live a little bit longer and have a better quality of life, because you're making sure that everything is tonified. Spring is the element of wood, and I think of bamboo, because in spring the energy is coming up and out, and the bamboo roots are spreading out. The internal organ for spring is the liver, and guess what happens in spring? Dandelions are everywhere. How convenient that nature supplies us with the plant we need in the season when we need it. Now, in the center of all this is earth. Earth, if one way that some people think of this, or some traditions, that you don't go directly from fire to metal. You go from fire into earth, and then over to metal, then from back to earth, down to water, into earth, back out, and so there's this cycling in and out. Earth is where our nourishment comes from. It's like the mother, and we can nourish and tonify the earth element anytime. And I always think of like the really highly nutritive plants, and we talked about nettles, and I think nettles pop up around here. I harvest them at the end of February. That's what you go out there. small, they haven't gone to flower yet, and they're really tasty. Okay, another big philosophical thought here. There's actually one of the nettles, right about like that. You can see some flowers on there, and the flowers are sticking up like this. When the flowers get seeds on them, they drop down, and that's when you can harvest the seeds. Got the little green seeds on there. Herbs are not just dry green flakes, twigs, barks, nuts, seeds, and berries in a bag or a jar. They are living beings sharing the planet with us and have their own reasons to be here. They are characterized by an energetic nature manifested through a complex set of molecules evolved to adapt to the environment in which they live. I think about reishi, for example. It's a mushroom. It's in an environment that's just full of other fungi, and it's full of bacteria and viruses. So it has to, in order to live in that environment, it has this energy that is about immunity to all that stuff. So when we ingest reishi mushroom, it is strengthening our immunity as well. Reishi mushroom does a whole ton of good stuff. So consider the possibility that the healing role in the environment in which they live may be similar to the medicinal properties employed by us as human beings. When you're out in the woods and you're gathering them or just hiking around, greet them with gratitude and respect, and they will serve you well. When you can appreciate that they are just as important in the big picture as you are, your herbal allies will truly become your teachers. And when I first started wildcrafting, I did not have that attitude. I was out there like, I'm at the supermarket. Look what I can get, right? But when I get home, I would feel really dissatisfied with myself. I mean, I got my nettles or my cleavers or my field mint, but I would be satisfied. So I started thinking, what's wrong with this picture? I'm not going out there and slowing down. I'm not paying attention. I'm not listening. So when I started doing that, I started feeling a lot better about what I was doing. And I've literally had the experience more than once where two or three people go out in the woods and they get greedy. Ooh, I got a big bag of mushrooms, but I want more. The forest will play tricks on you if you get greedy. Somebody's going to lose their favorite knife. Somebody's going to get lost. Somebody's going to get stung by yellow jackets. All those things have happened to me and other people when they get out there and they're like, I'm just going to take what I want. Not even what I need, I'm just going to take what I want. So don't treat nature as your grocery store. Treat it as your sacred garden. So here's some helpful links. I'm going to leave this up here. We want to write some of this down. As I said before, the basics are, when you're making medicine, pay attention. Keep everything clean, because you can contaminate stuff in the kitchen. I had a girlfriend who was taking a biology class years and years ago, and she did some cultures from the kitchen. And you would not believe what grew in the petri dishes. Kitchens are terrible. So, if you need to make some sort of home herbal vinegar cleanser with lavender essential oil, or I make vinegar with orange peels, and it smells better than just plain vinegar. Anybody got what they need off of here? Yes, I'm seeing some nods. Okay. This presentation, this is the usual disclaimer: educational purposes only, not intended as medical advice. Certainly do never start diagnosing yourself. When I became a student of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, I started thinking, oh my God, everything is wrong with me. I've got everything. I have every imbalance, and our instructors knew that this was going to happen. So they started telling us, look, don't diagnose yourself. We have a student clinic supervised by experts. Go to the student clinic and talk. Find out what's going on, and you can get some herbs, you can get some acupuncture. So don't die. Well, there's an old saying: the doctor who has herself or himself as a patient has a fool for a patient. So when you start learning about all this stuff, it's like, oh, I got everything wrong. I'm a mess. I'm a basket case. I'm going to die. So learn more about holistic health. You can become a registered aromatherapist with us, a master herbalist, holistic health practitioner, wellness coach. If you're interested in any of this holistic stuff, we can educate you. Now, this is references and good reading. This is where a lot of stuff that I'm talking about, except for my own experience, but these are the books that I always return to. You can write down author and the name of the book. You probably heard of Susan Weed and Matthew Wood. I like any of Matthew Weed's books, particularly The Practice of Traditional Western Herbalism, Basic Doctrine, Energetics, and Classifications. Rosemary Gladstar is an amazing human being, and I love her approach. She has the wise woman approach, which is why would we make a tea out of something when we can just make a soup out of it? Why don't we just eat this stuff and make it part of our diets? You can make a tea or a tincture out of nettles, but you can make nettle soup. I had a client, I was talking to her about nettles. She needed nettles. And she said, oh, I got them on my property. And a couple weeks later, she came back and said, oh, I've been making nettle soup. That's an approach that Rosemary Gladstar takes, and I think that's a really great way. So if you can make food your medicine, why not? There's some more good books. One that really blew me away is The Secret Teaching of Plants, The Intelligence of the Heart and the Direct Perception of Nature. When anthropologists went out and were interviewing indigenous peoples, they would say, how do you know what these herbs do? And the indigenous people would always say, well, Creator told me, or it came to me in a dream, or I was walking in the woods and I heard singing and I went into a meadow and the plants were singing to me. And the anthropologists are like, BS. They're just toying with me. But the thing is all the indigenous cultures say that's how they learned. The method of communication is the human heart. So when we can free our hearts up, the plants will teach us. And I know there's a lot of people in this area that I know of who have developed that capacity. It's not an easy capacity to develop because that's not part of our culture, but it can happen. I've heard many stories of the plant talked to me, the plant told me, the plant came to me in a dream, and those stories are still out there. This is still a human potential that we have. So it'll blow you away. It's not an easy read, let me tell you. You have to read it 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times. But eventually, the first half of the book is like science, and the second half of the book is like poetry. And I think science and poetry are what you need to open your heart to what the plants can teach you. Okay, let's move on. Thank you. I'm done. I could go on and on and on, but Andy gave me the 15-minute sign, so we want to have some. I did okay, huh? Thank you. Write down that email address. If you have any questions about anything herbal, you can always email me. My attitude is once anybody has been a student of mine, they are a student of mine forever. And it's also my wish that my students surpass me in skill and wisdom. So, but still, there's always questions. And if I don't know the answer, I know where to find the answer. Thank you. Another disclaimer. This information has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So, again, don't diagnose yourself. There's a lot of herbalists, acupuncturists, and naturopathic doctors out there who would love to sit down with you and help. I thought I had one more slide. I guess not. Okay, I'm all done. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Yes, questions?
Is there times where instead of prescribing something internally, maybe there's less toxicity, maybe putting it on your skin, like making some
Well, absorption through the 7 layers of your skin is, I'll give you an example. Monkshood, super toxic. You can use it topically and not get poisoned, but it's really good for muscle aches. In fact, there's a really great English soap opera kind of thing called Codfido about a monk who's uses reason and science. But he's the herbalist, and there's an episode called Monkshood. I got it from the library, and to watch it, and monkshood is used as a way of killing somebody. And but if they use the topical stuff, they use on one of the older monks. So the herbs, he's an herbalist, but they portray the herbs in that really, really well. I mean, topical is great, for muscle aches and whatnot, but you're not going to affect things quite nearly as much internally. But there's always other things that you can do. And some people are sensitive and they don't want to take medicine. I once had a patient, she's a medical doctor actually, and I knew that I could see that her issue was emotional, and she was having trouble with the emotional aspect of the condition. So I said, I'm not telling you this as your doctor or as your acupuncturist. I'm telling this to you as a friend. I want you to go home and listen to Aretha Franklin. You need to hear someone sing R-E-S-P, respect. You need to hear Lady Soul. You need to be moved emotionally. You need to break that up somehow. I don't know. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But sometimes you just have to nudge somebody in a direction where it's totally unexpected. And if you can, herbs are great, but really the best medicine is getting somebody to see themselves in a slightly different way than they're seeing themselves. It's the best medicine is philosophy. The best medicine is pushing somebody just a little bit in a different direction than the one they're going. And herbs can do that, acupuncture can do that, but listening can be the best medicine. Anything else? Yes.
For sterilizing jars, like to make a tincture. Dishwasher on the sterilized cycle, okay, or do you prefer boiling?
Well, if I'm going to sterilize something, I'll confess I use the dishwasher on sterilize, but I also, I will boil them for 15 minutes if I have the patience to do so. That's the best way. That's the way to be sure.
Okay.
Question?
Yeah, you mentioned about adult dosage, 150 pounds. So anything below is the same dosage, or we should scale that?
No, you can, well, this gets into the art part, but and again, my background in Chinese medicine. The Chinese say adult dosage is for anybody between 12 to 70, which I disagree with. I would go by weight. As someone gets used the weight over 150, and if someone's 140 pounds, go ahead with full dose.
Okay.
Or maybe a little bit less. I'll tell you something. When I give herbal recommendations to people, I always start them at the lowest recommended dose, because I've seen people react to herbs that 100 people had no trouble with whatsoever, and then someone comes in and said, I took your herbs and they made me throw up. It's like, what? So I start looking at the formula. What could possibly make them do that? It's like there's nothing in here that anybody has gotten nauseous about. Or someone comes in and I took your herbs and they made me jittery. And it's like, oh, I know what herb did that. So I just take that out. I started at the lowest dose, and if everything's okay in 3 days, then you can increase it a little bit to the mid-range or something. But I always start people with like first 3 days or 2 days, the lowest dose, or lowest recommended dose. Any other questions? Andy doesn't have a question. Well, I'd like to thank Andy for his technical expertise. He's my director and key grip and producer. And it's not just him. I'm up here getting the glory, right? But there's a whole team behind me that makes all of this happen. And I had some help from Tracy there. She helped me make a good presentation even better. We almost didn't make it, but we did. So gratitude and kudos to the entire team who makes this possible, and gratitude for you being here and listening to me. Thank you.